A very warm welcome to all the attendees of the Fireside Chat webinar with Mr. Gopalakrishnan and Dr. Tulsi Jayakumar. Today we will be discussing their very latest book, Inside the Boardroom, How Behavior Trumps Rationality. A very interesting perspective on boardroom processes dominated by biases, behavior, when they are in conflict with rational thinking and reasoning. Very pertinent and very timely book. So, first of all, thank you to both the authors, Dr. Jayakumar and Mr. Gopalakrishnan, for agreeing to participate in our webinar. Thank you so much. On behalf of the Arun Duggal Centre for ESG Research, I extend our warm welcome. In conversation with them, we have Professor Chitra Singla, Professor of Strategy at IIM Ahmedabad, Professor Sunil Sharma, again Professor of Strategy at IIM Ahmedabad, Mr. Rohit Goel, he's partner with PwC India. All three of them, all three panelists have different expertise and experiences in boardroom processes. By way of introduction, Dr. Gopalakrishnan, very well known, eminent personality in India. He had spent his time in multiple boardrooms, as director of Tata Sons, several Tata companies. He's been the chairman of Hindustan Lever, chairman of Unilever Arabia, Brook Bond. He was also the executive chairman of Castrol India, independent director of Press Trust of India. And the resume in front of me is so long, if I end up reading, probably I'll take another 20 minutes. So I'll stop there. Dr. Tulsi is a professor of finance and economics, and she also heads the Center for Family Business and Entrepreneurship at SPJ Institute. Thank you so much, Dr. Jayakumar and Mr. Gopalakrishnan. And both of them are very eminent scholars as well as practitioners. So it's our pleasure. Now, to carry the conversation forward, I will be handing it over to Professor Singla. Once the chat comes to a conclusion, we will open it up for Q&A, which we will moderate and then pass it on to both the authors. Thank you so much. Chitra, the platform is all yours.
Thank you, Anish, and welcome once again, Dr. Tulsi and Mr. Gopalakrishnan. It's a pleasure to have both of you here and have conversation on this very important and relevant topic. So my first question to Mr. Gopalakrishnan is, what was the motivation behind writing this book? I know you have been an author and you have written many books, but what motivated you to write about Inside the Boardroom?
Well, first, thank you, IIM, and thank you, Professor Chitra, for your question. What motivated me to think about this subject was that although I had spent 35 years on 25 boards in different countries, I still found the path rather hazy, the path ahead. And the quest for trying to see how to clear that path was a strong motivation. I don't think our book clears it, but it sort of removes maybe or brings up some of the dust. And when Tulsi, who's got more an academic background, I mean, you've been very generous, Anish, in calling me doctor and all that. I'm nothing. I'm just a practicing manager. And I said the marriage of experience with an academic approach might produce a different result, at least a novel result. It won't be a definitive result. So we have no illusion that we have produced some book which is the last word on governance. That would be a bit silly for us to even imagine. And in my many years in the board, I felt that, the board governance has two sides, like the moon also has two sides. We see only one side of the moon. And the side we see is rules, regulations, niti, niyam. but there's a niyat also. And niyat comes and is associated with behavior. And my experience is, I've been very privileged to work on boards which have been not perfect. No board is perfect. So long as human nature is there, there'll be things going wrong. But where I've learned a lot of lessons. And I said, therefore, can I bring that experience to see what is that unseen side of a board, the behavior? And can you imagine, just like if there's going to rain, you know there are dark clouds, there's a cold breeze blowing, and then you take your umbrella. You don't say, let me have proof. When you're raising your child, if after, when the child is 12, 13, 14, if the behavior of the child varies, if you're a parent, you will take notice of that early signal. And why can't directors do the same? And I've had good experiences of doing that, and no bad experience of doing that. So I said, when Tulsi and I discussed it, from my perspective, I want to add a small little brick to the masonry, a big masonry of corporate governance. India has done marvelously well, by the way, in corporate governance rules, regulations. But is it perfect? It's not. I mean, you asked me, tell me 10 things that are wrong with it, I'll tell you 20. Even though I've had the opportunity to participate in the Narayan Murthy committee, the Kotak committee, and with SEBI, but that was our motivation. Tulsi, anything you'd like to add?
Yeah, so I think I would also like to kind of say that we had already worked on a set of 6 books, which are shapers of institutions. And I think this was kind of a logical extension. So we are talking about how do you build institutions? How do you look at leaders who would not just be leaders, but be shapers? But it's not just the leader who builds the institution. Especially when you're looking at corporates, you have the entire governance piece. For me, it was also very important because we are not just talking about governance in the large corporates. Many of the large corporates, in fact, as the book would also say, much of the capitalization, the market capitalization and the wealth that is being created in the country is by family businesses and promoter-led companies. So where does governance feature out there? And so when we're looking at the shapers and the institutions, then one of the other pieces of that jigsaw puzzle is governance. So Mr. Gopalakrishnan, RG sir, as I call him, and me, we were just discussing it one day, and he knows that I teach behavioral economics, and my research areas are also in behavioral economics and family business. And we were wondering how we could combine these together, and that's how the book was out.
Interesting to know. When I read the book, I can completely echo what you are saying, that there is a behavioral side, and when you read it, you feel that you are not the only one who has gone through this dilemma. There are others. Maybe these are every director's dilemma, and there is a comfort, right, that these are the paradox everyone is going through. So, Tulsi, my next question is to you. This is for our audience who is listening to us. Can you provide a pen picture of the book, some of the key takeaways, so that we can encourage our attendees to pick up the book and go through it? I thoroughly enjoyed reading it. It's very, very readable, easy language, easy to understand book. Yeah.
Right. So what we have sought to do is basically we have sought to look at why is it that corporate governance, while it is supposed to be something which should be easy enough to follow, right? You just need to do some tick in the boxes. You need to have a certain set of directors. You need to have a certain set of guidelines. Okay, make sure that there are no related party transactions, have the requisite committees and so on. And yet, why do all these corporate fiascos happen? Why is it that boards fail? So using a set of examples from the corporate world, both from India and abroad, we've tried to pin down one, what are the kind of biases that lead to these kind of problems? 2, are there signals that one would be able to see or perceive or experience much before this kind of a disaster is going to happen? And those are what we call the prodromal signals. And then we go on to look at what is it that a leader must have? What are certain mantras for CEOs? What are certain mantras for directors? So essentially, we are trying to say, we're not being prescriptive. I think we are also learning in this process. I'm a new director, just about 2 years old. I'm a director in a company. I've refused certain directorships, not like RG sir, who has done a lot in this field. But I think that's what it is. Basically, try and see, are there some signals, and what should a director do if he sees that there seems to be an issue, right? And what should be the basis of him trying to address some of those issues, and how should he address those issues? So that's what the book is about. Sir, if you would want to add.
Yeah. So yeah, Mr.
I would just add to what Tulsi said, that the subject, the moment you moved away from rationality into behavior, it becomes a bit fuzzy, and arguable. But from my experience, I thought of 3 instruments, crude instruments, they are not perfect, which appear in the book. The first instrument is what we call a prodromal test. Let's like we all improved our English by reading what Reader's Digest page to increase your word power. We prepared a test, which I have applied, by the way. Over the last 20 years, I've applied it to many boards that I've worked on, and come to some conclusions which say that this is like a compass. It shows you, is it the wrong direction or the right direction? It doesn't tell you a precise point, but that's very helpful. The second thing that very often I was faced with was, what do you do if you disagree? And some people feel helpless. Some people think they should go to town and get their headlines in the next newspaper. And there are many, some people decide they keep quiet. And we have got something called the 7D steps, which appears in the book. And the last thing is a bit of a speculative thing. And I hope our book will be a provocation for some researchers to, I got this idea about 3 years ago that just like every leader, whether he or she is in corporate sector or even clubs, gymkhanas, music sabhas, newspapers, academic institutions, has the potential to become a bit of a self-obsessed guy. And his wife is the only person, like it happened with Winston Churchill, who could tell him, enough is enough. I said this fly on the wall concept, which we've given in the last part of the epilogue. And in order to test it, I actually did a fly on the wall assignment with 2 companies. I can't pretend that it changed everything, but I think it moved the game a bit forward. And I'm I'll be very interested later on if academic people and technical people look into it and see whether that has any value.
Certainly. We are always hungry for research questions which have practical relevance, Mr. Gopalakrishnan. With that introduction, now I would like to pass on the stage to my colleague, Professor Sunil Sharma, who would like to ask some questions related to the book. And I have one request to the audience. We will be taking Q&A towards the end of this webinar, right? So you have to wait for approximately 45 minutes, please. Yeah, Sunil, over to you.
Right. Thanks, Chitra. In fact, when I started reading the book, the metaphor of Mahabharata really caught my attention. And then from there onwards, I got hooked to the book. And it also made me wonder. So I teach strategy for living at IIM Ahmedabad. And in strategy, there is a very famous framework, which is structure, conduct, performance. And it says that the conduct of organization is influenced by structure of the industry. And then it says that the conduct of players also then changes the structure. Given the metaphor, and I also believe, it's actually reminded me of that human beings thinking is also influenced by the sangat or the ecosystem in which they live. Which made me wonder that are we expecting too much from our board of directors? Because we are living in Kali Yuga. And if you look at the way the yugas have evolved, so we had Ram in Treta, which was the era of Maryada. And then we had Krishna in Dwapar. And Krishna was master at blending my sense is purpose with pragmatism. And that made me think that maybe as board member, you really need extraordinary capabilities, how to walk that fine, thin line of what is pragmatic, what is not, how do you keep that right balance. And therefore, my question, this is a little bit of hypothetical question, that in Kalyug, do you think who probably would be a good board member, Ram or Krishna?
Okay, since you've given it, I suppose because we have alluded to Mahabharata in the opening, I think both of them would make excellent directors. And by using both, I'm not copying out. I'm saying that the value of a board is 2 + 2 = 4.25 or 4.5. Ram would have been unidimensionally upright as a board member. He would have spoken in direct terms. He would have shown great compassion if a human issue arose at the board level. Krishna, on the other hand, would be worldly wise. He would talk in riddles. So you'll have to apply your mind to figure out what exactly he means. And that's why we made him the general counsel of the board, because if you ask a legal fellow, is this right or wrong? He says it all depends on, and then you get drawn into a discussion. And you need both those skills. So I don't think it's one or the other being better. And every board has a Ram and a Krishna, by the way. In every board that I worked in, not exactly fitting, but approximately in that direction. So thank you for that question. Kali Yuga, in that sense, would not require a different prescription from Treta Yuga.
But just, sorry, a little bit of follow-up question on this. Does that mean that board members would be individually ineffective, but collectively effective?
Correct. You got the nail. You're spot on. You know, we spend a lot of time saying, what were the IDs doing? What were the company secretary doing? What was the CFO doing? A failure, just like a success, is a collective one, though we tend to attribute all the success to one hero. A failure is also a collective one. And I'm not using that to take away from apportioning blame. You know, if you have a CG power type of situation where the promoter has exercised his influence to create a web of companies. By the way, for me, two very strong, many Indian companies have a web of companies. You know, you can't even disentangle it. It's like a spider's web. And you can't even understand. Iska subsidiary, that one is an overseas subsidiary. I mean, we are not here to discuss Adani, but if you look at Adani, I mean, I think I'm not IQ 140, I'm not a Mensa 5 beta kappa, but for God's sake, I got enough intelligence. If I can't understand it, then I consider that to be, and nobody I've met understands it. So that's one signal that you get, that if it's so difficult to understand, koi dal mein kala hai, and you can apply your mind. And the second thing is related party transaction. For me, these two are red herrings, but that's my experience. I'm not saying everybody the same thing. The moment I see these two, I get my antenna up. That's Boardroom is not even mentioned in my in our book, but I'm giving you my experience. Yeah.
Great. I think that's a very thoughtful observation of how board function. Let me invite Rohit, who is a co-panelist. I think he has a very interesting question on again board effectiveness. Yeah, over to you, Rohit.
If I may just add a small point to Professor Sunil's question, even when I went from Unilever to Tata, this is about experience sharing and not about Unilever was very much saying simplify, simplify, simplify. No subsidiaries, associates. Tata was very much culturally like all Indian companies, because we've all developed a certain way of thinking arising out of the last years of corporate law and company evolution. I used to be amazed that small companies, small in Tata terms, like Rallies, or which board I joined, all themselves Rallies group of companies, and they had 14 subsidiaries. Tata still has, for God's sake. And the first thing I went about was to just clean it up. and have only one company. It took me 3-4 years of tax. So I just wanted to mention that this is a cultural hangover of Indian companies. Yeah, sorry, Rohit.
No, no problem, sir. No problem. I think that is a fantastic perspective, and thank you, Professor Sharma. So, Mr. Gopalakrishnan, I am a partner in the PwC, and I work last 20 years in the forensic domain. I've been part of large, massive frauds which are there in the public domain. So, I have seen very closely how board members face the challenges pertaining to preferences or biases which can potentially impair the board decision-making process. So I resonate with the overall theme of your book where behavior trumps rationality. I just want to understand from your experience standpoint, what are some of the common behavioral biases that you believe, based on your experience, that affect director decision in the boardroom, whether it's a self-interest.
No, your voice is echoing. Can you repeat the last bit? There's an echo coming in your voice.
What are the biases in the boardroom? Maybe I can take that on.
Biases, okay. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. So what are some of the biases, common behavioral biases that affect director decision in the boardroom? Maybe self-interest, pressure, knowledge, whatever, and how they can be overcome or mitigated based on your collective experience.
Go ahead, Tulsi.
So I'll start off with the biases part, Rohit, and some of the common biases. I think one of the biases is an authority bias. By the way, I want you to understand what is the reason why a bias occurs. Okay, so the antecedent to a bias is a heuristic that human beings tend to use when making decisions. So you want to take heuristics. Heuristics are basically shortcuts. They help you to make those decisions quickly. And if you read Kahneman's book, you have the system 1 and the system 2. So heuristics basically use system 1 thinking, which is more quicker, which is more a gut instinct and so on. And because of the use of those shortcuts are the biases, right? So when I'm looking at those biases, some of the biases which would be there in most boards would be one very clearly an authority bias. Okay, where you're saying that I need to follow not just the CEO, but anyone in the board who seems to be a person who is of a greater stature than what one is, right? So it's very, very clear, especially for new directors like me. It is important to keep that in mind all the time. And because one has been an academic and a practitioner, so one is mindful of the fact that you don't just follow the authority all the time. Similarly, you're looking at a groupthink bias, right? You do not want to say no. There is no dissent because you do not want to appear to hurt the others. There are also other kinds of behavioral biases. There is something called the individual confirmatory bias and a group confirmation bias, right? An individual confirmation bias is that you seek for those kind of signals which will confirm what you have been thinking. And a group confirmation bias is even more difficult to kind of attack, because if the group thinks one way, then you kind of think that's the best thing happening. There are biases like status quo bias. You don't want to change things. There is a escalation in the commitment bias, right? You're looking at a sunk cost fallacy, right? So there are a whole set of biases, and which we have kind of explored through various situations in the book. And these are the kind of biases. I'll let Arjit sir speak, and then I'll come in with what I think would be some of the possible ways in addressing these biases.
No, I think you covered it. I don't think I have too much to add, except I can say when I moved from Hindustan Lever, where I happened to be vice chairman, and if you're vice chairman of Hindustan Lever, you think hum paunche hue aadmi hai. That's your self-image.
Right.
When I landed in Tata, I found kahin nahi pauncha hai, because I knew so little about so many other things. And the authority bias, I had people sitting like Nani Palkiwala, Ratan Tata, Darbari Seth, and I felt like a chuha. Rightly so. I mean, I was a chuha compared to these guys. I mean, there was no... I remember, for example, if it was a tax matter and Nani Palkiwala spoke, you would not engage with him. You would say, "Theek hai yaar, ye to guru hai is cheez ka." If Kohli spoke about IT, you didn't sort of debate with him. But on one particular matter, whether is this right or wrong, we were introducing the brand equity, brand promotion agreement between Tata Sons and the companies. A very small amount, 0.25%, 0.15% was being proposed to be charged for the Tata brand name. And Nani Palkiwala, who has a high authority, potential for authority bias, he was an authoritarian, but people said, Nani said, he said, is that a right thing to do? Now, that's the kind of question that allows debate. If he thumped the table and said that's the wrong thing to do, then it, but that is Nani. Nani was Nani. I mean, everybody's not a Nani. And we had the debate and we went ahead and did it. So I'm just giving that as an example. Your body language, your verbal communication, especially those with the authority bias. I remember once Ratan Tata was in the chair and a proposal came up to take a property of Tata Sons and lease it out to Noel Tata's company, this Trent. And Ratan Tata himself said, I can talk about what is going through my mind. I will not talk of other directors. I say, bhai, chairman ka bhai hai, uska bhi company chal raha hai, apna hi hai. That was what's going on in my head. I was very new in those days. But Ratan Tata himself said, I would like the board to debate it. He's a very soft-spoken sort of person. He says, because it's not technically a related party transaction if you go by the accounting definition, but there is a relationship. But how do I know Tata Sons is getting the best rent for it? Can you show me? And this is back in 2001. I'm not talking of recently. And then they went back and they did their work and they found that instead of 100 rupees a square foot, it should be 110. And that's what we did finally. So the person with authority has a lot of influence in this matter. I just wanted to give examples. Yeah.
So I would also come in and say, I'm sure we are all aware of the Milgram experiment. Are we? If not, then I could just quickly run through that. Are we aware of the Milgram experiment?
Please run through it quickly, Tulsi.
Yeah,
that would be helpful.
That would be better, yes.
That might be helpful for the students who are there, maybe. So the Milgram experiment is an extremely interesting experiment. Of course, it led to a certain way in which academic experiments could have been conducted, and it led to the ethics review board coming in and so on. But this person, Milgram, who ran these experiments basically to check what is it that happens when human beings, do they have this tendency to be obedient? So, this was basically to see whether whatever happened in Germany with the Nazis could be attributed to the fact that people did not want to say no to the authority that is Hitler. So this was an experiment where there were people who were sought to go through the experiment through a newspaper ad. They were supposed to be paid a certain X amount of money, right? The person who was the authority figure was dressed up in a certain way with a coat and so on. And the experiment was basically this person who had been recruited through the newspaper ad would have to render a certain set of electric shocks to a person tied to a chair, right? And the authority would keep on asking them to keep on increasing the intensity of the shocks. And the newspaper ad recruits, surprisingly, were willing to go the whole hog and to really render or deliver the highest level of electric shocks, even though the person in the chair, who's obviously acting out a certain part that he's supposed to play, would keep on shrieking and saying that, please let me go, right? And this was something which he replicated across multiple countries, except for Germany, where he chose not to do it. And everywhere the results were the same. And so the point was that while this authoritarian figure was asking him to deliver those electric shocks, if there was another person dressed in a similar way, in a similar coat, and he would kind of say that, no, I think you need to stop. Don't deliver those shocks any longer. The chances that that recruit would not deliver the shocks would be greater, right? So essentially what we are saying is that in a board, it is important to have, and that again depends on whether the company has a culture like that or not, to have people who might say, what should I be doing? rather than what could I be doing rather than what is to be done, right? So that dissent part, if you have people who are willing to ask questions, who are willing to look at disconfirming evidence, I think that makes a difference. But again, as RG sir said, we are not very sure whether boards would be willing to do that.
No, absolutely. I think most of the biases, I can say these are real. I have also experienced similar situation in my investigations across the board. And with that note, I would hand over to Professor Singla.
Thanks, Rohit. Dr. Tulsi, in continuation to what you are suggesting, that you ended your last point that most of the boards are not willing to do that. So this is when I was reading the book and when I was reading about these biases and the mitigation mechanism, there was a table, very beautifully explained table with what should be done in terms of diversity of board, in terms of activism, etc., etc. One question came to my mind is that who should be doing that? Who should bell the cat here? Because on one hand, we are saying these board members are they can indulge in misbehavior or they may not do their part of dharma. And on the other hand, we are saying that, they should ask the right kind of questions, they should be aware of their biases, and, we are expecting an ideal behavior from them. So who should be doing this? Are we putting this responsibility on some of the active board members that you do it and then the others will fall in place? Or there is also a repercussion of that. Maybe that person who is asking too many questions and is more confrontational in nature can be sidelined by the other side of the majority of the board. What I'm trying to ask from both of you is, are you suggesting an idea of self-governing board? And if people are so self-aware, why would they even indulge in any such malpractices? Any thoughts on this?
So I'll take a stab at it first, sir, and then probably you can go ahead. So when it comes to this question of who is responsible, so Chitra, I personally believe, okay, and being a director, I can tell you, and this I can share with you, that when I was being invited onto the board, the person, the promoter had spoken to RG sir, and RG sir had said that if you're willing to hear someone who will dissent with you, then you can take her on board, right? And I think that was a very, very important point, because I would not want to be part of a board where I end up, and we all know what it is to be on a wrong board these days, right? So while we are saying who will do it, I would say I would want to do this myself if I'm on a board, right? I would want to check, I would want to use these signals, I would want to check whether things are right, wrong, and I can tell you that at least the board I am on seems to be something which I'm quite happy to be on, because there is, it is not his master's voice speaking all the time.
I hear that part, but I'm building on Sunil's point where he's saying an individual person can't correct board behavior. It's a collective. Board is effective as a collective. So maybe Tulsi is comfortable in saying dissent. And let's assume Chitra is not comfortable in saying dissent. And the promoter has brought me in on this understanding that I will not be saying dissent. And by the way, I have said no to many board positions for the simple reason the promoter, even when they come to my office, they say that, I remember one of them saying in Punjabi, because I come from Punjab, ki bas thonu aime rakh lene hain. Matlab, we will just, you are just there.
Just come there.
Telling me that you will be a dummy person, And I said, then why do you even want me? And, then I spoke with other colleagues and they said, no, let it go, Chitra. If somebody is so open about and setting the expectation up front that, I just want to have a women board member and I don't want a dissent voice. But I'm saying, but there are people who are not dissenting, right? Absolutely. So how to make these boards effective boards? Who will take initiative in having these mitigation mechanisms?
So I think first and foremost, we will need to look at the CEOs also looking at corporate governance very differently. It cannot be taken as something which is forced upon them, and therefore it is something that they have to just go along with because that's what is the rules of the land, right? They must understand why a board exists and what is the benefit that a board brings on board. So I think some amount of education for the CEO is also important. But besides that, I think it is also the duty of every director to understand, because I think with all these biases that we speak about, many an individual might think it one of the opportunities of a lifetime to be on company boards and not see what is the flip side of it. So I believe that education of both the CEOs and the directors is critical. But I would like Sir to add to it.
No, what I want to say is I don't like the use of the word dissent. I'm not playing around with the English language. I have preferred to use the word, I might have used it in the book, in the writing, constructive dissonance.
Constructive, yeah.
Now, there's a big difference between the two. And people who join boards use the word dissent. And dissent means, main nahi manta hu. Constructive dissonance, is there another way to look at it? Constructive dissonance requires a skill. And that skill has to be taught. It can be taught. Behavioral people can teach it. One of my passions is to keep telling those who do corporate governance training, why don't you, I'll give you a list of 10 skills, soft skills, which is beyond clause 49 and accounting rules and IFRS, where you have to teach skills. And I want to give you an example of constructive dissonance as compared to dissent. A proposal came to Tata Sons board when we were going into this DTH, Tata Play, what is called Tata Play now. And the proposal was a sound one and everybody agreed. And they said, but you must keep the Tata name out of it. So it will be called something else. I felt that was, and everybody agreed on it, by the way. All the group bias and everything was applicable. And I was a new fellow on the board. I don't know whether I was skillful, but I said, I have a slightly different point of view, Chairman. He said, yeah, what is it? And I call that constructive dissonance. And just like Vibhishan praised Ravan before telling him he's doing the wrong thing, I also used a bit of that technique, though I wasn't conscious of it. I said, with such distinguished people around the board, I also support the proposal. But I wonder whether there's another way to look at the proposal to avoid the Tata name. So they said, why? I said, most of our products are B2B products. Nobody knows. I mean, Tata's known, but Tata Steel, they don't encounter Tata. And the only consumer business we had was Tonko, which we sold. So I said, this is a great chance to promote the Tata name. So if you called it Tata Play, every evening, millions of people are going to see, and that brand registration will be of great value to the company. But I can give that as an example of, instead, if I thumped the table and said, I don't agree with all you guys, I think I would have had a different outcome.
Correct.
And I took the inspiration later on when I thought of it from the way Vibhishana approached, though Vibhishana paid the price for it later on, but that's not the subject of our discussion. But he approached Ravana and at least saved Hanuman's life, otherwise the Ramayana might have ended there, So constructive dissonance is a word I do prefer. There was another situation, again on the Tata Sons board, where I did not succeed. I must tell you those also, because it should give the impression. When I used to be chairman Unilever Arabia, the Arabs used to have a very lovely phrase. They said, before you shoot your arrow, dip its point in honey. And this sort of stayed in my head. I said, it's a rather cute way to say, ki bhai, kathor baat bhi meethi tarah se bolo. And we were having a debate in the Tata Sons board. At that time, we were entering telecom. By the way, we didn't succeed in telecom, as events have turned out. But whether we should go for GSM technology or CDMA technology. Ratan Tata was very much in favor of going to CDMA. None of us was a telecom expert. So there was no Nani Palkhiwala of telecom sitting around the table saying, aisa karna chahiye. I felt we were doing something which we should think about. And after some time, I sought a separate meeting, and why not a cup of tea? I went to Ratan Tata and I gave my case to go into the GSM. And I put it in a way which I said, I can't see anything so distinctive about CDMA. And therefore, if the GSM is the big pond in which everybody is swimming, why do you want to create a separate pond of salt water in which you want to swim? Something like that. But in the end, he felt very strongly, but it was not a matter of an ethics or something, it's a matter of an opinion. And I gave in. And unfortunately, our project didn't succeed, but there are many reasons behind the failure or success of a project, not just the choice of technology. That might appear as one item. So I want to give that as an example of saying how you can disagree without being disagreeable. And that's a skill. That's a skill which you must teach.
So I think I came from the point also, sir, that even this point of how you would have a constructive dissonance has to do with the way in which you're framing your arguments.
Exactly.
Right? So that's also behavioral. How do you frame?
It is. That's exactly my point. You and I are saying the same thing.
He's talking about soft skills. So since we have too many questions to ask, I personally wanted to ask that, can personal ethics and business ethics be at conflict? And how to resolve that conflict. But maybe that question is for some other day, because our colleague Rohit has a deadline of 5:30. So Rohit wants to go ahead with his question first. So Rohit, over to you. And after that, I will request Sunil to go ahead with his question.
Sure. Thank you, Professor Singla. And my apologies for this hard stop. So my question is to Mr. Gopalakrishnan in particular. So the question is around ESG governance, right? This is the hot topic. ESG is the hot sought after topic nowadays. And before I go to the question, let me give you some data points which I have experienced. So according to the PwC survey, 45% of the respondent reported that there is a general lack of understanding about ESG. 42% responded with lack of ownership over ESG in the organization. And one of the global investor surveys said that 87% of the respondents think sustainability reporting by corporates is greenwashing. Now, coupled with the complexity of behavioral dynamics as your books lay out, do you really believe that existing boards in the companies are fully geared from an ESG governance standpoint? Or is this a time-ticking bomb or greenwashing bubble just waiting to be burst? I think this is my first question from an ESG governance standpoint. So, Mr. Gopalakrishnan, since you have a huge experience in this domain, would like to take your views on this topic.
Thank you. I presume the respondents you're referring to are directors and managers.
Yes.
I see the ESG problem in a different perspective.
Yeah.
The numbers you quote are possible. I can't confirm or deny them. The whole world is in the same dilemma that you mentioned. So why single out the directors? Look at nations, look at presidents, look at large oil companies. So when you have a fuzzy problem, then you must expect, it is inappropriate to expect clarity. This is my basic point. There is an evolutionary process. You want a national language in India, we have been through a journey of 75 years. Somebody gets up and says, I want clarity. Everybody will speak Hindi from tomorrow. Immediately, there's a certain type of reaction. Then Dilip Kumar and Devanand come and they run around trees with pretty girls and everybody learns Hindi, right? So we have to do that. We are going to go around in circles a bit. And my most memorable anecdote is I was in a place called Kumbakonam. Most people who are from the north will not even be able to pronounce that name properly. And the guys were watching Kaun Banega Karodpati, which is all in Hindi with Amitabh Bachchan. And I went and said in Tamil, I said, you guys are all watching this. Do you understand anything of what's happening? He said, sir, when 1 crore is involved, how does it matter what the language is? And this is where, in a roundabout way, we are going to get to in ESG. So I accept your point, but the solution to a complex problem is not the straight line. That's why flies go in circles, companies go in circles, clubs and gymkhanas go in circles, academic institutions go in circles, because they are constructed to be that way. That's my answer.
Sure. Any perspective, Dr. Jayakumar, from your side?
Yeah, I think I did read that report of yours also. But I believe it is also because, especially after the economic uncertainty in the last few years, not just now, but even otherwise, I think board directors, they are basically constrained because many of them are looking at it in terms of a short-termism. And also this understanding that their role is basically to try and maximize just the shareholder wealth. I think it's only now that people have started saying that your role is far more and you need to look at the stakeholders and the ESG. So I think, as Sir said, it is going to be a journey. I also remember anecdotally, I'll have a few anecdotes here and there, but I remember that as a member of one of the industrial bodies in Mumbai, we were looking at a conference somewhere in June this year, and we had some very senior industrialists from Mumbai. And one of the conference panels was supposed to be on sustainability. So someone proposed that why don't we have one on sustainability on ESG? And one of the senior industrialists said that it is a Western conspiracy to make it uncompetitive, right? So industry is viewing it as a cost enhancing measure. So when that happens, how do you think the board of directors, with all the dissonance and this thing that you have, you will not be able to say anything when there is such a strong view on ESG. So it's going to be a journey. I think owners, especially the promoter-led companies, they will have to look at sustainability as an investment. And it is only then that it is going to enter into the agenda. Because otherwise, they're just looking at maximizing the short-term wealth for the shareholder.
No, absolutely. I think I agree with your thoughts, Dr. Jayakumar and Mr. Gopalakrishnan. I also was giving a training to the independent director last week, and I think I had this question as of my final question. I think the view came similar like this, that it's a complex problem. We accept that this is a problem. There's a realization of this problem, but I think it's a journey. It's going to take time. And directors, given the regulatory impetus and heightened sense of responsibility now, are taking cognizance of these issues going forward much more than historically. So I think on this note, I'll hand over to my colleague, Professor Sharma. Over to you.
Can I add a small point to
Sure, sir. Sure,
I have a slightly different approach than Tulsi, because you can't take what one guy told you and say boards are like this, companies are like that. I don't think she meant it in a sweeping statement. I can tell you myself, in 2001, I used to say this is a conspiracy, it's all rubbish, right? Then I educated myself. And if I look now, it's 22 years. I have now turned the other way around. Okay. So there is a process, and it's like a drunken man getting to the lamppost a bit. We'll get there, but I hope nations will lead the way, because one of the big problems is when nations themselves are, look at G20.
Yeah.
2090, I'll also be carbon neutral, yeah. Koi takleef nahi hai. Meanwhile, let me burn coal. So I just wanted to make that point and clarify that I don't think Tulsi meant it in a...
No. I hope that was not misunderstood.
No.
I misunderstood.
No, absolutely not. Not. Thank you so much. Over to you, Mr. Professor Sharma.
So this has been a very interesting conversation. But then I also, the tonality of the conversation is that this is work in progress, and we need to really do a lot in order to achieve the highest level of excellence when it comes to board effectiveness. Now, in my mind, improvement only happens through innovation. And if we have to really improve and work towards board effectiveness, then we'll have to also think of some out-of-box solutions. If you look at as of now, the board appointment process, perhaps, if I can take the liberty of saying this, works like a collegium system where new board members get appointed by the organization. And we all know that many times these appointments are also a matter of convenience. And when the selection process itself is flawed, how can we expect these individuals to then act with utmost integrity? And in board situations, I have also been board member for 8 years now. There are harmless situations, and then there are crisis situations. Nobody minds, people to have an opinion in harmless situations. So these are all harmless intellectual conversation. The real test comes when there are crisis situations. And when it comes to crisis situation, there are other stakeholders who are also equally important. Now, when you have these high sitting fees, greed triumphs over, my sense, is integrity.
Absolutely.
And what kind of innovations have we really seen is there any sincere attempt, or is this like a cozy group of individuals who come together, sit there, have a process, but at the end of it, it continues to be ineffective?
Can I go on?
Yeah.
I would, with due respect to you, disagree with you. Having seen boards for 35 years, and we have described in the book, there were 3 types of boards. There used to be orchestral boards, ornamental boards, which then became orchestral boards. You defined that journey. It is true. The impression that you have was quite prevalent in the late 80s, early 90s, when everybody said, "Ye sab kahan se aa gaya yaar, corporate governance." Promoters had the view that ye meri company hai. Kaun hai ye log bolne wale? I, in fact, got into a public debate once. I'll even tell you, it's Shri Cements in Calcutta, where he said, "This is my company. I'm doing it for my children." And I said, "No, sir, I beg to differ. You've taken public money. It is not your company." And then we let the face-off settle down, because I said, the problem arises when you think it's your company. If you're 100% owner, yes, do what you like. But you're only 51 or 56 or whatever at that time. So I have seen a big change, at least in the boards where I am associated. I agree there's a large mass of people who are probably still in the old mode. But that will always be in any big social change. Everybody doesn't follow the leader immediately. I have been on boards. For example, I was on the board of AkzoNobel. I was on the board of Castrol. And we said, we are going to go out and get an independent director. And let the headhunter tell us, here are 5 candidates who approximately answer your specs. Now you make a choice out of these 5. Although each one had a suggestion of 3 or 4 names. So I think there is a change. But this is like the acceptance of Hindi in Tamil Nadu or those sorts of things. It takes time. But the change is definitely there. I think on the whole, one of the reasons we wrote this book was, this is another aspect of innovation that needs to come. I had a practice in my boards where I was the chairman. I would arrange after the annual general meeting over a drink and dinner with my directors, no agenda. And people were so used to board meeting, hey, iska kya agenda kya hai, list of points, tick, tick, tick. And I just socialized the board to say, what can we do collectively which is going to be better? They've written a case study of it. And that case study is also doing some rounds. Then people open up. And a little bit of C2H5OH at 8 p.m. helps to loosen up a few tongues, And I've had comments like, some people are oppressively dominant, to which a response would come, well, we don't have to point finger at who is oppressively dominant, but we must all remember that our ear size is 4 times the surface area of our mouth. So maybe we should try to listen 4 times as much as we talk. The message went. The board became very constructive without pointing a finger at an individual. So it all depends on your acceptance that the pace is, it's like women on boards, that's an innovation, believe me. And I can tell you, when the first time it came, I said, where are the women, etc. I myself was not fully sold on it. But now I'm very much in favor of it because they think differently. If you don't have the tolerance for it, that's fine. Or you want to put your daughter or wife there, that's okay, that's your choice. But women are very valuable resource. Likewise, other forms of diversity. I'm taking women only as an example. So, sir, be patient. I think we are moving in the right direction. Every time there's a blow up. In fact, you've written about this in Tulsi, one of those companies, that lingerie company, right? Where everybody was buddy. Why don't
Victoria's Secret, yeah.
Why don't you just point it out since they've all read the book, you don't have to go through the detail.
No, I mean, so you had Barrington Capital raising a huge smoke about the way in which the entire board had been formed. I mean, there were people who had been there because they all belonged to that certain community. And Victoria's Secret, we are all aware how they had to completely change their positioning itself. So,
But
And Theranos is a good example. Look at the
Theranos,
names they had in Theranos.
So look at it. It's like, so if you are, let's say, an independent member, or if you are a board member, you're also supposed to engage in self-reflection. And why don't we make it transparent that out of 100 companies, 20 companies feel that we are doing a bad job collectively as board members? Is that kind of self-reflection possible?
It is. But each company has to do it.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying, that do we really have that kind of innovation?
no,
No,
but
the innovation,
sorry, I mean, I didn't understand your question, Sunil.
So my sense is, look, they say knowledge without integrity is a dangerous thing.
Absolutely.
Right? We have a lot of knowledgeable people, but do we also have people with high integrity? And I think some of you, therefore, you allude that even knowledgeable people sometimes are vulnerable because of this concept of human beings will perfectly rational. And now we are talking about bounded rationality, or we are talking about that behavior trumps rationality. Now, if knowledgeable people are also vulnerable to irrational behavior, and integrity probably is just one aspect of it, essentially surrendering to authority, given that sitting fees are also very high, greed overtaking rationality. At the end of it, we need honest assessment, because when an organization collapses, there are the consequences of an organization collapsing are humongous. Are we ready? Are we seeing continuous innovation? Or are we seeing, for example, lip service? So is there a lot of lip service which is happening, or are we really engaging seriously with this question of making boards effective?
Sunil, I'll just add one small point and then I'll leave it to Ajay sir. I think the problem that you're alluding to, which is that the lip service, is partly because, as I had said earlier, people do not understand why a board is needed. I'll tell you, some of my own family business students, when they are on their path to, becoming public companies, they would look at who are the kind of people whom we would want to take on our boards. It is very possible for some of these companies which are, transforming from an SME towards a large corporate to continue to have that SME mindset. Ki ye mera hai. Like sir said about the other company, the cement company, this is mine. So whom will I bring in? People who are puppets. So it's not lip service. It's basically because of lack of knowledge on the part of these companies that what is the purpose of the board. So I think that it is important for companies which are transforming to go through a systematic process of understanding the need for governance, and how can they really not pay lip service to it, and how can they really transform themselves, because that small mindset is not going away. Sir, your comments on that.
No, I just want to say that there are two kinds of transformation companies try to do. And the reality is human nature is human nature. It can never be reformed completely. Transactional type of transformation, reduce my cost, get the head count right, can happen at a fast speed. Culture will change slowly. So you make a valid point, but it's like saying, how can I get Hindi to be the national language within 5 years? It's not quite a... I'm taking things that take a lot of time. Family planning. Look at family planning. India is one of the most shining examples of family planning, because our population replacement rate has come down to almost replacement. But it has taken 40, 50 years. And I think the same thing is happening. Women in the workforce, all the various little initiatives are moving the thing forward. I have not found a dramatic way to do it in a short time, because the word innovation is used as though you can suddenly change it by an Amazon or a Google. I don't think, at least I'm not aware of it. If somebody has the idea, that can be, I will look at it.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Okay.
Yeah, over to Chitra. Yeah, sorry.
Thank you, Sunil. Very interesting question that what other innovations can happen to make our governance more effective. Since it has already been 1 hour, so I just want to have a concluding remark from both Tulsi and Mr. Gopalakrishnan, and after that we will take audience questions, if any. So meanwhile, audience can type their questions if they have any query for Mr. Gopalakrishnan and Dr. Tulsi. So I would like to end this conversation with the takeaway from both of you, Mr. Gopalakrishnan and Dr. Tulsi. What do you think is an actionable item, even if it is one, which can make Indian boards more effective, which you think the government or the policymakers should think about? Any thoughts on that?
Can I go on that, Tulsi?
Yes.
I would recommend strongly that the prodromal test should be done.
You know, Mr. Gopalakrishnan, when I went through those 15 questions, I honestly felt I do a lot of research in family businesses, both listed and SMEs. I personally felt that, you know, a lot of family businesses will fail that test.
Will
No?
fail, exactly. That's my point.
So that
No.
means that they should not have board members, right? Because the question is board member have to decide on the basis of that test whether to stay or leave.
No. I think that's where I have a different point of view. You see, before thermometers were invented, nobody knew whether he had fever. Badan dada garam lagta hai. Now, if you don't even administer a thermometer test, how will you know he's got fever? So start by applying. I'll tell you, in Tata's, Ratan Tata once told me, I want to change the innovation culture in Tata's, not the innovation process. Process is easy. There's some software, there's some consultant who will come and train you, and you'll do all the various stages of the... and he and I discussed it, and we said it's going to take a long time. And we devised something called an innometer. I won't go into the detail of that, but an innometer is something you can stick into a department and find out what is their approach to innovation. And I think it is a wonderful idea. Not a perfect idea, but it certainly caused the production manager to say that why is my innovation number 3.7, the bloody HR department gets 4.2. Was a jhoot bol rahe, because nobody was giving HR the credit. So I think even if it's a crude measure, it's a good help. And that questionnaire is not perfect. I would very much like academics can improve it, come with a different set of questionnaires. If you give it to the OB people, they will make it into a 7-part thing, which takes you about 4 hours to fill up. So we'll have to do it in a practical way. Sorry, if any of you is OB, I don't intend to offend you.
No, we don't have OB in this panel, but I'm sure, yeah, my OB colleagues won't be happy about this. But yeah, Tulsi, any remark from you, please?
So I don't know whether this sounds practical, but I would think, especially Chitra, since you mentioned the family businesses, when there is a listing happening, I think the promoters, the family business entrepreneurs, they should go through a process of training where so there is a training for the board of directors. That training should incorporate some of these behavioral aspects. But I suggest that there should be a training for the owners as well. Who's going to do that training? I'm not so sure, but I think it should be mandatory that there has to be a training on the part, because you're playing around with shareholder wealth.
I completely agree with you. In fact, most of the examples that you have shared, and I've seen in my personal experience, that the family owner or the promoter, if they are open-minded, they are open to change, they are very acceptable of what the board has to offer.
Extremely.
But if they are close-minded, it actually impacts the dynamics quite a bit.
Extremely so. And that's where I feel that, where the promoter is coming in with this whole attitude that, look, I need to learn. Okay, I was working with one of the large corporates, which is a family-owned business. I'm not going to name any names, but they said that in terms of our working, I mentioned this earlier, though we have become large, but we still retain the small mindset, right? And that to me was a very powerful kind of a statement, which would apply to most family businesses. Yes, so some training, which kind of gets them to open. And I'm sure, Chitra, that you would kind of agree here also. There's a lot of pride in the family business culture that they come from. And they see some of these things as, signals of how frugal they are and how they are, managing their business very well and so on. So I think that has to change, because Rohit asked about ESG, and that's where I was coming from. That if ESG is seen as a cost, and if board of directors and their sitting fees are seen as costs, and anything that is being said is seen as a direct challenge to their authority, then you're not going to have progress.
I agree. And thank you, both of you. I would like to take 2 questions from audience. The one which is just in front of me, and it is in continuation with what Tulsi, you are sharing on family businesses. So Mr. Sumit Chakravarti is asking that we have spoken about women on board and the importance of that, but also Professor Sunil Sharma talked about tokenism in Indian board. What Sumit is asking that, do you see, both of you, in your own experience, that this tokenism is an issue only in family businesses, or women members in the board is also looked at as tokenism in non-family businesses? Or do you see these differences there?
So would you want to answer? I'll just cite one statistic from our book. In fact, I don't remember which page it is on, but in some of the largest countries in the world, the top companies do not have women on boards. In fact, India has done much better in terms of having women on boards. But in terms of the tokenism, I do not believe that women on boards are tokenism in many companies. Maybe in some of the family businesses where they're bringing in their own, wives and so on. But even there, I would not agree with it, because the women who are on the board are not just puppets who are just sitting there and not doing anything. They do have some role to play. So I would not completely agree with it as a tokenism.
Okay.
My view on that is that it's to do with the male psyche.
Yeah.
It's nothing to do with company boards. It happens in building societies, it happens in clubs, it happens in music sabhas, everywhere. Today I've got a forward in WhatsApp saying how gender bias is playing out in Carnatic music circles in Chennai. So it's there everywhere. It will take time to be diluted, if not eliminated.
Okay, there is another question from Chitra Singh, and I think she has been very patient. She sent this question around 5 p.m. So she, specifically for you, Mr. Gopalakrishnan, she's saying, I wanted to ask, when we talk about niyat, that is intention, which is more subconscious seated, does the person or the board member think that subconscious directs our behavior more strongly than our conscious and super conscious brain?
Oh, I do believe that the subconscious reflects itself in the behavior of the person. I'll give you an example. When Tata Finance happened, I can take these examples because it happened 25 years ago, and I'm not revealing any secrets. I said, what is this guy Dilip Pense doing? I didn't use the word niyat is wrong. I was also new in Tata. I had to survive. So I said, but why does he do A, B, C, D, E? And I found other people saying, yeah, you're right. That's not the way people should behave. And then, of course, when the whole thing blew up, which is all described in the book, Ratan Tata was the one who blew the whistle. Remember, for him to blow the whistle. So I think niyat shows in the way. Some people are they want to become unicorns so fast. That is niyat. Then the niyam and everything starts following after that. So I hope I've answered Shurja Singh's question.
Yeah, Vishotra, yes. I hope so. There is another question from Nishant, and what he's saying.
I just want to come in here to Yashudra. Yeah. I think for anyone of you who might be interested, I don't know, Yashudra, whether you're a student or what you are, but there is this fascinating difference between the conscious, the subconscious, and the unconscious. So behavioral touches only at the subconscious level. The unconscious is neuroeconomics. So we have not even gotten there, right? So that's a fascinating, I mean, if you're a student, you might want to look at some of those things, because a very, very small proportion of what we do, we might actually be responsible for. Okay, and that's the fascinating area of neuroeconomics.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, okay, maybe the last question from Nishant. So what he's asking, when the board speak of sustainability or ESG, how do you think all three, which is people, planet, profit, are equally prioritized? Or do you think it's people first, planet second, and profit third?
I think it's all of sorry, I'm going to, is it okay? Can I?
No, sir, please.
I think it's all of them. And I want to give you two examples, because examples, I know you'll say that's Tata and it's not every company, and I accept that. But I can only give Tata examples because I have not, I can't give Birla or Ambani or Reliance or something, because I have not been on those boards. Before I joined Tata, when the Taj Bengal was being constructed, a naturalist called Anne Wright, who just died day before yesterday. She just passed away. She and her husband became Indians. She went to JRD Tata and said, if you construct your hotel the way the plan is put in the public domain, it interferes with the flight path of the birds. And that will have long-term damaging effect. And JRD said, fine, we will look into it, and changed it. So it is people, planet, profits took the third place, in the sense it cost a little more money. When I was in Tata Chemicals, I was the vice chairman of the board. We had a proposal to set up a plant somewhere in Tanzania, in a particular area, which would be a very attractive business proposal. We spent $10 million doing the prospecting. And at that stage, we realized, through somebody who spoke to us, that this disturbs the habitat of the little flamingo. अब मुझे पता भी नहीं था what is the little flamingo. There's a big flamingo, small flamingo, medium flamingo. But we did some study and said इसमें कोई risk है तो नहीं करेंगे. So I do think it's planet, people first and profits third. And we wrote off $10 million that year. We told the shareholders, by the way. But then I know that these examples you will argue are few and rare, but everybody must try. Sorry, Tulsi, anything you want to add?
No. So in my experience with family businesses, not on boards, but in my experience with family businesses, if the family businesses have evolved, they see these not as mutually exclusive. They don't see it as mutually exclusive. In fact, they see whatever they are doing for mitigating the carbon footprint or anything which they're doing for the society. In fact, society has always been a huge priority with many of the family businesses in India. Philanthropy has always been a big one. But now to be looking at it in terms of, formalizing it, I think family businesses are, if they have evolved, then they would not want to see it that way. But that's not a statement that I would say is a generalization for every company.
Okay, great to hear both of y'all's perspective, and I'm sure all of us have more questions to ask, but keeping time in mind, we'll have to close this webinar. Over to you, Anish, please.
Thank you so much, Chitra. Thank you, Sunil, Rohit, and really a pleasure and honor, Dr. Tulsi and Mr. Gopalakrishnan, for joining us. And listening to all this, wonderful examples that you're pulling out from the history of Tata's, I am really tempted to take all those interviews and, construct an idea of, indigenous interpretation of sustainability, which is drawn directly from, Indian business practice, much before it has become a buzzword, where it is part of the DNA. And I think
since you said what you just said, Anish, I want to remind that in our own Vedanta, it says, and I'm modernizing the language to make it easy to comprehend, you have to do 4 things to be successful. Vedanta, and Swami Vivekananda repeated this in Chicago in 1893, so that's why I know it. I'm no scholar of Vedanta. He said you have to do 4 things. 1, be self-aware. Second, protect your resources, by which I mean air, water, the Panchabhuta, and people, vendors, suppliers, employees, etc. Third, serve others before you serve yourself. And fourth, take decisions ruthlessly, but implement them with compassion. And I find if Vedanta has said it in some other context, and Vivekananda pulled it out, I'm not smart enough to reinvent it. So your idea that you should look at Indian wisdom is a very good one. And if anything I can do to advance it, if IIMA or SPJ would advance a collection of anecdotes, I will try my best to help. I'm not smart enough to be able to do it, but you guys are.
Thank you so much. And thank you, Dr. Tulsi, for wonderfully weaving these anecdotes with concepts from Kahneman to Milgram experiment. So in the audience, we have a lot of our researchers and PhD students, along with MBA students and other guests. I'm sure they would really appreciate that bit of the connections that you are able to do so effectively and efficiently. It has been a beautiful session. Now, we don't want this to be ephemeral and lost in time. So what we will do is we will capture this, it's recorded, and we will make a transcription of this, prepare a report, and it will submit to you, and it will be available on the center website for anyone to read and reflect upon and reach back to you.
So I didn't know that you're recording it, and if you're going to transcribe it, I don't know whatever I said about Tatas and so on. I would certainly value having a chance to look at it. I just shot my mouth.
No, so as a matter of policy, Mr. Gopalakrishnan, the recording is first shared with all the panelists, and only once they say okay, if there are parts to be edited, that is edited, and then only it goes into that's like a routine practice that we do.
Thank you all very much. I'm always energized when I interact with academics, as my experience with SPJ has shown me. It's a great pleasure to talk to you and talk with you folks.
No, but thank you very much in being so upfront and candid with your observations. We actually wanted it to have a conversation as opposed to just the ritualistic way of answering question and answer. And it was a delightful experience engaging with both of you. I think it's as you rightly said, it's a work in progress, but collectively we probably will make it better. Board as an entity is very, very important, not just as an entity, but also for enhancing organizational effectiveness. So thank you very much for writing a beautiful book, and also thank you very much for sharing your wisdom and experiences with us. It was a pleasure to interact with all of you.
Thank you so much. Thank you.